video is to show you a few tips for using the same image when you need to have a portrait and a horizontal view of it. So I have an image that we're going to use, and it was taken from a website. So it is a hero image. So I could scale it and get a good width. Right, so what's important when you're thinking about framing a picture in something like this website is you want the focal point of your photo to not be covered by the text, right? So as you're scaling, you want to make sure that there is ample room for your text and then your picture. And in fact, your focal point of your picture, you probably want to be centered over in the space that you have on your right. So let's say this is about 5 inches. So you would want the focal point of the faces in about the center, right? So that's a good rule of thumb for how to kind of crop. In another video, we talked about how to darken so that the picture, I'm going to turn off our guide, so Command, semicolon, how to darken the picture behind the text so that we can read it better. And I'm going to drag it down because I still have that. So this is a gradient. There's also that option, this option. So you can see just adding some darkness behind. So I can use my brush with black and kind of brush in a little bit behind the text. Then I can take that layer and say filter, blur, Gaussian blur, soften it out. And that might help. I can also then take the eraser and erase around their faces where I know the focal point I want to be is. You can see that that looks very sharp and crisp, so I can come back to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and this time just kind of lighten it out a little bit. All right, so that's how you can bring your photo into focus when it's this kind of landscape view. Now in this tab, I have 8.5 by 11, so I can go to Image, Canvas Size, and you can see it's 8.5 by 11 inches, so this is for the print design. Same campaign, so we're using the same photo. So I'm taking the photo and I drag it in. And you can see it is not the right ratio. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and scale it because I know I at least want these ladies kind of down here at the bottom. Remember, when I have transform controls on, I need to either click the checkbox or return to finish that transformation. Come back to my movement tool. So we've talked about rule of thirds for framing. You can see your rule of thirds by clicking on your crop tool. You can drag it to the size of 8.5 by 11, and now you can see your quadrants, right? Or your thirds here. So here's a focal point, here's a focal point. So I probably want to increase the size of the photo and kind of bring their faces right up into this area. Right? Okay, so that's pretty good. All right, so now I have a couple options. I see that I have a gap up here at the top to fill. So what I like to do is, you can see because I drag the photo in, it has this icon, which means smart object. To be able to edit the pixels, I need to make it not a smart object. So if I select that layer, I can right click or command, control click, rasterize layer. All right, now I'm going to use my rectangle selection tool to just kind of grab a little bit of the top of the picture and make sure that layer is selected. And I'm going to say image. Now I'm going to say edit, fill, and instead of white, content aware. So whatever your content says, you're going to say content aware and say okay. So this is one of Photoshop's algorithms where it's going to try to fill the top the best it can, right? It only looks so, not that great, right? I probably want it to be this kind of sky color. So I could come in with my lasso, grab some of the area that I don't like as much, do it again, edit, fill, content aware, see if that's any better. It's only a little better. right? So sometimes it doesn't work perfectly, and that's okay. We have a couple options. So I'm kind of going to get a little bit more of the sky, a little bit more of the tree, just using my lasso tool and my edit fill, content aware, see if I can get it a little bit more the way I like it. So I can come in with my rubber stamp tool. It uses the brush size. I set where I'm taking it from, so I'm going to make it just a little bit larger. I set where I'm taking it from by holding down Option and clicking. So I'm taking from that area. And now when I draw across, you can see where the crosshair is where I'm painting or where I'm rubber stamping. And you can set the opacity. So that's one way that you can kind of fill in some of the area, right, that you want. Okay, so that doesn't look so bad. And depending on what I'm doing in this advertisement, something like this might be enough, right? It might just be fine the way it is. Another thing that you can do is make a new layer, and you can grab a color. So you could use your eyedropper. I can grab this blue. I'm going to use my gradient. It's set to the foreground to transparent. I'm going to click and drag down. I have it on radial, so I'm going to undo, Command Z, put it to linear, which is the first box here. Right, and I can always kind of just fade in a background. So I've done this with blue. I can set settings for the mode. I can do opacity, make it a little lighter. I can also decide that I kind of want to blur the background. So a nice way to do that is you can duplicate your crisp layer. So I'm going to say duplicate layer. I'm going to turn off my crisp one, but I'm going to call it crisp. Okay, so on this layer, I'm going to say filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And instead of really blurry, we're just going to make it a little blurry, right? So maybe 14.8, great. Okay, and then we're going to put a mask on it, and we're going to use our gradient. I'm going to do black. Okay, so what you're seeing is where there's white, I'm seeing the picture. Where there's black, I'm seeing through. So when I turn on my crisp layer below, I'm seeing through to the crisp image, right? So if I, in the black, painted in their faces, right? Now their faces are going to be very, very crisp. So that's a great focal point. If I wanted this to already be faded right here, if I paint it in with white, right, it looks like it's fading and blurring right as I'm painting because I am showing and hiding in that mask. Okay, so that's how you can kind of like blur out maybe what's not as important. So if you want the focal point to be just the people. Okay, and if you feel like that got a little crisp, you can always make sure that your mask is selected. Go up to filter or blur, Gaussian blur, and you can adjust. Remember, you can zoom out so you can see it better. You can adjust what your blur looks like. And then you can always come in with your white. Oh, that's blurring, so I'm going to go in with my black and just make their faces really crisp again. So that's another method where you can make a nice resting spot to be able to overlay text.